started. I'm going to confirm, and y'all can see my screen. I'll just get a from Casey. Check.
Yes, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, this is great. This is our first slide. And let's move to the next one. Y'all said this. Who am I? We already gave a bit this. I did start and co-found Rev Partners. I'm no longer doing Rev Partners. And I am now doing full-time Supered. And I'm being very clear is everything I've ever learned at Rev Partners, I'm giving away for free on Supered. It's literally the app that I wish I had when I was starting Rev Partners 3 years ago, and we built a product. And the thing I wish I had the most of is the ability to get people to adopt systems faster. And it's all about that. I no longer have 40 HubSpot certifications because you have to get them yearly. But I will be attempting to do that during certification week this week as we go through. Okay, not a whole lot about me. What is Supered? This is not a promo for Supered. So just to be clear, if you just know what it does, is it plugs documentation directly into your CRM and makes things easier of the framework we're going to talk about. It makes the framework we're going to talk about much easier to do. And if you're solutions partners, it changes your life forever, which we're not going to talk about this today. Just know that is a true statement. Agenda. I love the word BLUF, bottom line up front. We're going over it. We'll talk about the bigger issue here is the way we implement CRMs. There's just a darn big problem that leads us. Adoption's actually more important than the process we choose. And then introduce this adoption framework that will make it easier to create adoption, and then Q&As at the end. If we may get done earlier than an hour, but we'll go through this. And I love answering questions at the end. One of my favorite things to do. So also ask them throughout. I have this thing open, and Casey, if I miss one, just stop me and we can do it. Bottom line up front. Gosh, this slide's already wrong. Why is it wrong? It's because that should be defined. Let us get started. Okay, so this is the big idea is, again, if you've heard me say these things, this is not a surprising, is your CRM is a product. You should name it. You should claim it. Inside, and when you do it, your CRM is not HubSpot. Your CRM is, the Vortex, whatever you're going to name it, and just name it. And it requires user activation. Who are those users? They're the end users of your system. So when we do waterfall projects that don't optimize for end users or retention of those end users, we fail. And it is the reason we fail. Waterfall point in time projects delay and prevent CRM impact for businesses. And we'll talk about, we'll show you what that looks like. And if this is true, thus adoption is your true north. Now, some people don't like true north metrics. They think they don't give the full picture. I'm telling you, I disagree with you. If people are not in your CRM, using the CRM every single day, then your CRM's a failure. Your product's a failure. And that's okay. But here's a framework on how we can best do that. And I like to call credit, not CREIT, credit, because admins need to get credit for what they're doing. And you get credit by what? Adoption. Period. That's the bottom line. That's what we're going to go over. You could leave now. And if you leave with this is what you need to remember. Okay, let's do CRM as a product. See what CRMs, what are they supposed to do? They drive revenue. That's the only reason they exist. They help me more efficiently and effectuate revenue processes inside my business. That's it. And what people say is when you use a CRM, it is better. When it's used it is better. For every dollar you invest in a CRM, you get 8.71 return on that. That is almost a 9x return. It makes your sales more effective. In fact, those that have a repeatable, standardized practice generate more revenue. It makes everything more efficient. It increases productivity. It allows you to forecast when revenue is actually going to hit. And it just sucks less being in a company that has a adopted process or adopted CRM. Like sales teams are actually happier when they have a CRM that doesn't suck their soul like Salesforce. I'm sorry, we'll get to that. But what do we know? We know this doesn't happen most of the time. Like there are people that go on Reddit. There are people that because they can't say it openly. They're like, I hate everything about my CRM. It makes me input data and it does not help me do my job. What is that statement? That is user feedback. And if that user feedback is that doesn't have a feedback loop in your product, that is your CRM, it fails. Because that is the most important of any feedback for a product is the people using it. And so you have to collect that so they understand it and solve for it. So the reality is 50% of the time, CRM implementations fail. 50% of the time. I know Rep Partners made a living off bad, poor HubSpot implementations. They would come in, give someone a framework, create the product, and allow them to start realizing their vision. How do we know this? Now, here's some stats that people are putting out. They're everywhere. What you can see is around 50% of it doesn't happen, and they often don't even ever achieve up to 75% adoption. So you can go look at these. And this is just the great unspoken reality of CRMs is most of the time, half the time, they don't provide the value they're supposed to provide. If anything, become a cost center. So why do they fail? There are 5 reasons. And we'll go through them in order. Adoption, low user adoption. And then I just want to make this point. These 5 reasons are actually all related to each other, and they have a common denominator called, it rhymes with cooperate. I'm trying to make it a rhyming thing with adoption. It all rhymes with option. It's called adoption. So let's go through it. Adoption, low user adoption, fragile, heavy customization, which leads to low adoption. There's prioritization because there's scope creep because we don't know what to do and when to do it. So we never fully finish the process or get adoption. We don't have the training materials or the support we need because we have users that don't know how to do something that you've trained 18 times and they still don't know how to do it, which leads to low adoption. You have a lack of integrations because they don't connect to the systems that you need inside your process today. And that leads to low adoption. Everything leads to low adoption. Get adoption right. To get it right requires lots of things, but just know adoption is the most important part of a CRM. And what's the bigger reason this? And this is my opinion, and this is what we're saying, is this: project-based CRMs don't prioritize this. In fact, they're incentivized not to. You're incentivized to do customization because you can charge more for it. You're incentivized to say no to any additional request that's not inside scope because you have to pay more. You're not incentivized to create training or have a way to do support or maintenance because you actually want them to come back to you so that you can fix it again because so you can make more money. And every new integration is additional charges. Like, you're incentivized to not do this well. And so it's just project-based is not the way to go. And then what this leads to is what I like to call the great CRM reboot cycle. What is this? There's 3 phases, and it looks a little bit like a implementation that's 3 to 9 months. And then the initial adoption may be okay, but then as people leave and you get new users or people get angry or the business evolves, there's decreasing usage that happens over the next year to 2 years. And then what happens? You need a new CRM all of a sudden because no one's using it. You change CRMs or you update the current one, you migrate, which often looks like people have migrated to Excels. So the process, you got to take them from the Excel to the CRM. You purchase new tools because there's 2 years from now, there's new tools that you want. You integrate those tools, and then you repeat everything over and over. And it looks like this. You do CRM and you look at the impact over time. It may get better and it will work for a point in time, but they're static. If anything, I would actually call it they're decreasing impact, not staying the same. And you go through a cycle where you get very little. This is very fragile. This does not work long-term, but this is what most companies are going through today. You probably, if you are an end user, have experienced this yourself. And here's the cost that all happens is, you're going to say this is a narrative. And I've heard this so many times. It's fun to talk about is, a project-based CRM, because all the features or the adoption doesn't get done, they spawn rogue Excels, and there's no way to merge it into, when a rogue Excel comes, there's no way to merge it into your process. Over time, the adoption decreases It does not increase. New hires, lack of training. The data in the CRM gets less and less accurate as less and less people are using it, and more Excel processes are done outside of the CRM. New questions require different data that is not currently captured, and then you create another Excel. Then you have a shadow IT for people solving for the needs that they have that are taking people away from the CRM. And then because you have shadow IT, now there's a new requirement for a new integration with even more tools. And it all culminates with everybody screaming for, I just want a one source of truth. When if they just would have done it as a product, this entire narrative would not have happened. And then guess what? You're starting the CRM reboot, where everybody screams the one source of truth again, or everybody has a source of truth, because nobody knows what the heck's happening, and everybody's operating off the Excel sheet that their investors or their CEO is making them do. That's the truth. Okay, how do we get out of that? How do we fix this? I call it CRM as a product. It's called growth-driven CRM. Whatever you want. The idea here is there's iterative processes that allow you to take in user in states. So regardless if there's a lack of training, you create more training. If there's new people onboarding, you're putting that into a process. And so this is what we'll talk about. How do we have a framework that allows us to do that as a process? And part of this process is this point. And there is people that have disagreed with this. And I say people, I mean other like talking heads in other places, in other worlds. Specifically in the Salesforce world, will always scream, because it benefits them, process is more important than adoption. And it's going to say, hey, focus on the process. And once you have the process, then you select the tools. No, that's wrong. Why? Your tool affects how easy it is to adopt. So if you pick process first without thinking, or having it a strong importance of how easy. And so sometimes you pick a process that a tool might not be able to support, which by the way, Salesforce can support anything, because that's what they're like, we're fully cooked. Like, that's the point, is sometimes you shouldn't do a process. Maybe it's bad and it's not adoptable. So the point is the tool you pick matters just as much as the process that you choose. And if it's a process, and that's why I'm such a big believer in HubSpot, but point, adoption of a CRM is the most important aspect. We should treat it as such. And if people don't do it, it fails. Next, MVP. You always launch with a minimum viable product. You identify what do people need right now, not what do you need in the future. What do you need right now to make it better? And then you will start to then iteratively come up with feature releases that are essentially net new processes being added to the CRM. They're not static. Define the core usage and then iterate from there. This point, growth begets complexity, needs change, the scope changes. So if I try to define everything I need for my business right now, let's just take Super. We have 2 people, we are 250K AR. And if I defined what I needed for my CRM right now, I would be wrong 3 months ago. 3 months in the future, I would need something completely different. Growth begets complexity. Don't over-engineer. Fix for today, and then it's the best practice. And then always prioritize training and a place to take issues. And so it is more important that everybody is trained on your current processes than you launching a new feature. I'll repeat this, because I think it's important. It is more important if I went to if I went and I was asking any sales leader, does every person in your team use the CRM and follow your deal stages? It's a binary. Yes, no. If it's no, don't do anything else. Don't do anything else. Get everybody trained and make sure they're all following in the sales stages so the data is correct. And if you launch another feature, you're actually just making it more difficult. So let's just keep that in mind as we're going through. Okay. So let's go. After this, I'll take a bit of a, we're going to stop on this slide, but we'll take a bit of a rest and we'll ask questions. So adoption is the king or the queen, whichever one. It is the king, the queen. Adoption is greater than process, which is greater than tool. And in that order. So this is important, because if people aren't doing the process, then guess what? I don't care how good your process is. It doesn't exist. And let's make this next point. every drop in someone doing it has adoption has an outsized impact on all things. Just as an example, bad data, a 5% decrease in user adoption may mean that the report is 100% useless because the data isn't correct. So if I have a net one revenue, or I have net new number of deals, or I have how many, like, what is my forecast for this time? And I'm using most likely, best case, and commit, and someone's just not following the process, the report that I'm using is not usable just because I had a decrease in user. And now I can't trust what's telling me. What do? I go make a new source of truth based on my understanding because I cannot trust my CRM. Your CRM just failed. That's what we're fixing for. Implication, adoption over function, sacrifice function for ease of use every single time. Sacrifice function for ease of use. Do an MVP, then iterate. The most important metric is adoption. I think this is important to think is email is a really good one. Everybody uses email. Thus, even if it's antiquated and there's better ways of doing things because everybody's fully adopted it, no one asks the question, what's the ROI of my email? They just buy it, which is what you have to have. Ongoing. This means if CRM is a product, implementations never end. It means anything you build must be maintained, it must be managed, must be trained, must be onboarded. Any feature release makes it more complicated and increases the burden of the admin. This is why admins feel like one person shops, and they feel so sad sometimes. Also, you'll see this. One Excel has the power to destroy $1 million investment. If it's not ongoing, it just takes one Excel. Death by Excel. And then the tool matters. The tool matters just as much, if not more, than the process. The tool matters just as much, if not more, than the process. Okay. Let's go to adoption. I think we said this. We'll just stay on this page. I will scream from the rooftops about this point, but adoption is your true north. And if we do anything else, it is not the number one goal. Is very likely, is strongly likely that our implementation or whatever you're doing will not be as successful as if you were tracking this very tightly. The rest of the presentation is about a framework that will allow us to do this better. Before I continue, let's do a few Q&As/chats. I will be looking at them as we go. Okay, chat is still, I think are we all in the chat? Credit, strawberries, mine was blown. Steve is here. Okay, do we have any questions?
No unanswered questions at the moment.
No unanswered questions in the moment. Okay, I'm just going to answer these and get these out. Okay. Sweet. Okay. Well, let us keep it going. Adoption questions. Okay. So we're getting into the framework. I think it's important to think about this is when someone is using a process, here are the questions that come in their mind. So when you're thinking about adoption for this new framework, how do you decide what to build for the MVP? I'll cover that at the end as that gets more into the growth-driven CRM question and less about the adoption as the number one that you're prioritizing. So I would cover that at the end. Adoption. Here are the questions any end user is asking all the time. They ask, and it's just simple: who, what, when, where, why. The 5 W's. Who should I ask when I have a problem? What should I be doing right now? When should I do the thing? Where should I be doing it? And why should I do this? And they're in some capacity answering this every single time, even if they agree, even if they've adopted it, right? Like we need to have instilled all these questions all the time, and people must be constantly reminded of these things. And you'll often hear this reflected as, I just don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like, what are you telling me? Where am I supposed to do that at? And why is this even important? Like you'll literally hear people ask these things in questions. It may be behind the surface of a passive aggressive question, but they're asking this. So we need to answer it proactively as part of any implementation we are doing. And here is the introduction of, oh my gosh, I did it again. I could have sworn that was done. We're doing it here. I'm going to sit on this one. Okay. Here's the introduction of those tactics. I'm going to focus on this. The bottom one is response to these questions. Response to these questions. It's really difficult to just do that. You cannot just have a document that answers this question in one place. You must answer these questions everywhere, all the time. And this is where the framework comes in. And so it gives us a way to think about how often are we answering these and where are we answering these. I like to call it credit. And the credit stands for celebrators, reminders, inspectors, definers, enforcers, and trainers. And so let's go through, like, you want to celebrate actions. You want to remind people about actions. You have to inspect actions. You have to define actions. You have to enforce actions. You have to train actions. And all these things have to be done inside your product at all times. Another point, these characteristics, is inside of these tactics, they need to occur and appear on predictable, repeatable patterns. They should be setting clear requirements of expectations. And all of these things in some fashion need to be immediately accessible. So you can see something and answer these questions quickly about these celebrates. So let's go to the next. And let's, here's some examples, and this will be the meat, and I'm going to, examples of these that we can do. And we're going to finish early because we're flying through this stuff. So if you have questions, please let me know. Last time I did this, I had like 100+ people, and there are lots more questions.
You have one question.
Yes, I'll answer that one at the end for shut up. Is credit. Celebrations. This is an easy workflow that you can create inside HubSpot that is so simple. It can be an email or Slack notification that is a company-wide notification when a deal is won. But there's so many actions you can sell. Any action you want to take, you can celebrate. Close one's a really easy one that you can just do, that you could repeat with any customer you work with, or even in your instance, like celebrate, close one, celebrate these key actions that are occurring with a simple workflow. And it will change. It will change. That simple thing will change. Remind people. This is the same. We were doing so. I have this set for myself. I remind myself if I have a deal in Super that is over 15 days old, and then it's a Slack notification to myself so that I know to go do something about it. So did you have these reminders about very specific things inside close date? It could be number of days in deal stage. It can be missing a certain property. Like, it's a simple reminder for people to help. That it automates, it's more personal, going directly to them. Escalations for these reminders occur when a reminder has been sent, and then you have a notification that something's not complete. So example of this would be, it only takes one time, a few of this, but these are all automated, is I have a close date that for a deal that is 45 days past due. I got reminded at 15 days. I got reminded at 30 days. And at 45 days, it automatically is sent to the VP of sales and the CEO. I'm telling you right now, as soon as you do that, and you ain't ever going to have a close date. Slow again. Inspectors. This is inspecting actions. And I find this to be one of the more powerful ones. When you think about top-down, bottom-up approach, so many of these can be bottom up. Some of these are top down. This is a clearly top down one. So weekly sales calls. If you're not running a weekly or biweekly pipeline review to inspect the health of deals, then there's no way you're going to follow a sales process. Period. It should be, because you need some way to ask questions. Hey, I see this deal's here, and there's an expectation when you get on these pipeline reviews that you have certain things open. Next step is always field. Close date is correct. Forecast categories updated. You keep it really simple, but that'll allow people and have a set of expectations that are going to be done. It needs to be reoccurring on the same day, every single week, or biweekly. Deal tags. I love deal tags at HubSpot. And so you can create something that visually does the same thing that you want in a weekly sales call, where you can have visually set up that if a due date is closed, or if there's traction, you can actually make positive trends but these are inspecting, automatically inspecting, visually showing everyone that's looking at them, whether something's in danger or healthy. I found this to be one of the most effective drivers of having people do the right things for a sales process. And then reports, I like this one lots, it's the auto scheduling of specific reports or a dashboard that's sent to the executive team on a periodic pattern. So I often will we have a monthly where a dashboard, your sales pipeline review or your close one revenue review, whatever it may be, is automatically sent to your executive team that they get. And if something's not correct, people will get asked questions about it very, very fast. Number 4, define or definers. Is this HubSpot has a lot on this called the idea of a data dictionary, but this is the idea that anytime we're doing a sales process, you have to do this. You have, what's the definition of the sales stage? What is a required field? What does this field mean? What is this workflow and what's its purpose? It is having this data dictionary, and you often create these and then no one ever reads them, and they're there and people ask you questions about them all the time. So this comes to the next, embedding the content and where they work, or making that content easily accessible at any time with any question they have. So these definitions and these defining are constantly there. So, and they have a definition and define inside the system they're working on is crucially important for this era of just-in-time learning, especially as we have more and more remote. Next is enforcers. These are things like required properties in the deal object when you move, or required for deal creation, the entry and exit criteria that go across. And even this is something I like to do is having a commission gate. If there's something like you must have a billing contact on this record before you can move to close one. And so that's something, when you think about these processes, they need to exist outside just sales, but into other departments. So commission gate is how you are satisfying, and this can be for onboarding as well, like having when you have your sales to service transition, is requiring specific information before you can do a close one or before they can get commission, which is the heart to sales. And the last is training actions. This is the idea of and it goes with defining, is having training, not just definitions, but a repository of things like, how do I create a deal? How do I use my lead status view to make sure I go through and prospect and put people in the correct sequences? And the next, an issue tracker, an easy way for every user to collect information. This isn't working for me, help. Okay. You see this credit framework. This is hard. This is what people build businesses around. When you're thinking about personally, the question you should be asking yourself is, how am I doing these? And do I have a way? And you could just get rid of this. Get rid of this and just define for yourself. I think it's a good exercise. How am I celebrating, reminding, inspecting, defining, enforcing, and training in my instance? And you should have a way you're doing this and be able to then put in, here's where my sales documentation is. Here's how we do issue trackers. Here's how I'm enforcing. Here's how I'm defining. And you just go through that, and it'll be extremely healthy exercise, no matter where you are, whether you're client facing or you're internal to a user. This is where this is a lot of what Supered is built on. And I will spend a second, and talk about how Supered helps this. Is I think like this idea, this is what the burden of the admin, and how do you take that away so the admin can stop being firefighters and start being strategic and helping execute processes. Because this is the maintenance work. Every time you add a new feature, how do you maintain it? It's all this, right? This becomes your day-to-day. So I'll do an example. I'm going to just go to a random HubSpot, and then I'll do one thing about how these things will go to a demo. And so here's an example, right? I'm going to go to is, let's say I'm on a dashboard. And you built this dashboard to go through your AirCop reporting, and people, the head of sales like, why do I have this? Why is this here? This is what I mean by your data dictionary. Not only can you have it defined, but you can also have it embedded in content. And so there is no way. This is how you remind, this is how you define, and this is how you train. You can add Loom videos directly inside HubSpot so that you can have these done. The other point is you have a base that allows, you see the sales ramp is like, okay, what's my, gosh, I can't remember. I'm talking about this business. You can actually have like a battle card, and you can have your battle cards or information for sales teams directly inside your CRM. So if they have a question, they have a place to go to answer it. And if they answer a question and they don't have it, then they ask you, and you can constantly updating this. So you have one place without them leaving the CRM from the look, and then you can add these definitions anywhere in HubSpot so that they can have these quickly like defined, reminded, and trained. And it helps you start. Getting this framework, and it makes it much easier for you to get adoption. And so there's robust use cases for this, but that's not the point of today. I just wanted as a point, like here's an easy definition, and then having questions to be able to ask. This even gives, if I type in deal, it actually looks up HubSpot's, so I can look up HubSpot's questions in their knowledge base. Okay, so I'm going to sit here for, this last point that I'm going to go over is what are things that take away from adoption. I call these the adoption detractors, things we have to be constantly on guard for to make sure are not, that we're protecting against. Excel spreadsheets are one of the biggest opportunities to improve your CRM, and one of the biggest opportunities to destroy your CRM. In fact, it's more likely going to be when a Excel spreadsheet spawns, there's a reason for it. It's either because the person doesn't know how to use the CRM, the data inside the system. Number two, the data inside the system is not correct. Or number three, the process that they're trying to do just does not exist. And if any of these things are not addressed, it destroys your CRM. So you need a way of eating it. As you'll see, functions not included, data not correct, training needed. And so you need to identify these and then eat them. You need to eat Excels. You need to train the people. You need to make sure why, if the data is not correct, understand why it's not correct. I mean, it may be some other adoption issue, probably another Excel. And if it's a true new function, then you can eventually do a new feature release inside your CRM that you're training. And eat the Excel spreadsheet itself. So often this can be like examples of this would be like forecasting or net revenue retention or my renewal process, right? Like these tend to be non-MVP things. Next, databases. Every time you add or someone gets a new piece of technology, it is a new database that must be integrated with the system. And it's not additively more difficult, it's multiplicatively more difficult. If you add a new database, your job as an admin just got insane. It just got multiplicatively 2x, 3x, sometimes 4x more difficult. This is why I'm such a big believer in HubSpot, because all your data is in one place. So just be very careful if you add a new database. And that's if you see how we built Super, it's not a database. It's actually an overlay, and it puts everything in your database. So it helps you use it. And that's just as a point, is always be really, really careful you're not adding new databases. And then onboardings is how people experience the CRM during their first 14 days. They're either going to become champions and saying, I love this process, it makes my life easier, or they're going to hate you forever, almost, right? It's going to be an uphill battle. Anytime someone's changing a process or changing a CRM, they're moving from something they knew to something they don't know. You're asking them to get worse at their job, and they're either going to get better and become a champion, or they're going to get worse and not like you and create Excel. So just know that onboardings are a key point when you're doing adoption. So spend lots of times training people. And that's why, period. Okay. So this is the end of the content section for today. And we'll do questions and answers. I see questions that will go on. Please put more. I'll start with the first. It is Shadab. For this new framework, how do you decide what to build for an MVP? Here's how I have decided and helped people work through it in the past. I'll actually just bring up, I love Miro. I love drawing. RevOps. I mean, some of the premise behind RevOps is this idea that processes transcend business, meaning there are processes that exist regardless of the play you're running, and that you can think through these. So I think there's some foundational levels of every business when you're thinking about it. And I think it changes by go-to-market just slightly, but like, know that's here. So I would go through something like this. I'd say, here's our fundamentals, right? Do we have duplicative data? Or inside HubSpot, do you have your contact, your marketing contact management set up? Meaning, do you have things marked as non-contacts? Can you today, do you have customer life cycles that every customer has gone linear through and defined correctly? Do you, when you have them, can you have the first contact, the original source? Is it correct? And you understand where it came from? How are you, if you're doing outbound, how are you building your list and how are you getting people there? If you have digital events, how are they getting into it? In your sales stages, like do you have sales stages with distinct start and finishes, entry and exit criteria? And if you go through something like this and you're able to just then highlight, well, yeah, that's not, Matt, we don't even have people following our sales stages. I'm not worried about list building. And you can, from the fundamental, you can come here and you can highlight and then just color in. Here's what our MVP is going to be. Here's what we're going to focus on. And then you'll see we can start launching new features or new boxes as we grow. And over time, we'll eventually be into a product that has all these features that can serve the entire organization. So this is how I think about it, Shadab. If I was creating MVP, and I think it needs to be done visually for people. You need to come in with some kind of framework. And I can add this as a giveaway at the end. So everybody has it. Feel free to add on another question if you have something. I answered that live. I'm putting done. Steve, this is this is Super Steve is here. How much of a company's process should be a custom to them versus standardized best practices? That's a great question, Steve. It depends. I truly, it depends on the revenue maturity of the company. I've had a framework I've used in the past where there's 4 stages of revenue maturity: stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. And depending on where you're at in that depends on how custom it should be. So a question, everybody should answer, how do I create a deal? Everybody has to answer it. Now, how you answer it and what you're doing and the complexity of how you're doing it is going to change, but you must have that answered. So that to be standardized, you can have a standardized list of questions to be answered, but how it's answered will likely be unique per company. Now, where you can get some benefits of scale of this, if it's industry specific, right? So there are industry specific things that are always true for real estate. And so it's when you start to get rich in those niches answering those questions that are most likely. I'm going to do done. How do you explain to customer the most important adoption and set real expectations on an adoption timeline? I'm going to push this away. How do you set the importance of adoption is I would almost, those facts I just shared with you at the beginning, you almost need to put this a part of education in the sales process onboarding. Like, hey, look, most CRM implementations fail. The one we're doing right now is not going to, because they most failed for adoption for these reasons. The one we're not going to, it's not going to fail for these reasons. And adoption is our primary goal. And so we're providing all these resources. I highly recommend there's a dashboard where you can see who's adopted, who hasn't adopted. And so there's some fun adoption dashboards out in the wild that if you type in community forums, you can find that you can use. And then and it's part of a framework. And that's how you set expectations at the beginning. And I like to keep things very binary, Claudia. And I say things like, is everybody on your sales team, have they been trained? If they're using Super, like, are they in Super, and ask a question? And then are they, are they using the sales stages? And if they say no, that means we're not adopted. And I'll just stop and sit there and make sure they have it. And there will always be a better experience for these binary yes, no questions as a gate to moving to the next feature. That's how I think through it. We can always go offline if you want to get more specific on that. Haler, how do you determine which features to add and when to add them? So here is, I'm showing you this picture. What I'm not showing you is there's some kind of discovery process you do at the beginning, but I'll usually say something like, do you want to grow? Yes or no? Perfect. How much do you want to grow by? I want to grow by 110% this year. Perfect. So what revenue are you at today, and what revenue do you want to be at? I'm at 1 million and I want to be at 3 million. Perfect. How are you going to hit that goal? Is it inbound, outbound? Like, what is your go-to-market strategy? Oh, well, we're doing paid ads and we have a whole ad and agency we're working with this. And I have a sales rep that is, using LinkedIn to prospect. Perfect. Okay. Let's focus on inbound first. Is this working for you? I really don't know. Honestly, I don't know if it's working or you're spending money. Perfect. I would make that yellow, right? And I'm just going yes, no steps, asking them by go-to-market motion for them. And it's allowing me to understand what's most important and when. And once you have that, you can then say, okay, well, you don't even have your sales stages right. So we can focus on top of funnel, but let's just focus on getting the mechanisms of the basic of sales stages done. And we'll sit there. Then we can come back around. And based on what I'm hearing is inbound's a really big issue. We don't know if it's working. We have no attribution model for us to look at that. We aren't even doing lead scoring to be able to do pass or recycle. So then we'll focus on these boxes. We'll do SEO ops. We'll do some SEM, and then we'll go to lead scoring. Does that make sense to you? And then once you say that, they're like, no. I'm actually not worried about that. What I have to get happen is I need more people. I need more leads, and I want to outbound prospect. Oh, okay, perfect. Well, most important, let's make sure we get our sequences and and then that's how you're just constantly asking yes, no questions. And then you put them in. I then have I had a full I have some pre-done timelines that I was using. That I could okay, it sounds like here's something I've heard of in the past based on your sales manager, and you really want to get a sales weekly dashboard. And I'd already have these paths in my minds, right? So you generally know what someone's going to do and you can guide them towards this. So Taylor, I hope this was helpful. I can go in a lot more detail for that specific portion that I'm actually doing a full podcast called Fast and Tedious, where I'll be going over all this stuff. So feel free to reach out to LinkedIn or somewhere else if you have follow-up answer. Done. Johnny Spencer, great event so far. Linked to the elite adoption of CRM. Do you have any advice on how to productize automations in a sales onboarding process in a market whereby commentary on progression through a process is historically limited? I'm not fully, let's be clear. I don't fully understand the question. I'm going to answer it how I understand it. Productize sales onboarding where there's bad data about sales progression. So that's what I heard. So I think what I'm showing you here's a way to start productizing sales onboardings. But I'd also say is you need some kind of framework like this where you have boxed in very specific actions in a framework that you're doing inside HubSpot that you can repeat and rinse, and that you can lead people through. And so me even hearing that, if you have historically bad data, that means there's probably data duplication. There's probably customer life cycles incorrect. And none of this stuff is needed, right? You don't need any of this stuff yet. And you probably don't have a sales process that has a linear start and stop. So we need to sit here. Then we should start saying what's happening. We should do a sales weekly review. And you know what that looks a whole lot like, right? That looks a whole lot like our sales management path. Or if you have so my point is you can have paths based on end states that are different. And I find that to be the most helpful to help people choose and understand the difference. Okay. Answer that one is done. Are there any additional questions, Casey, over either in the comments or can you move them to the Q&A, or if you have more questions, please, ladies and gentlemen, move them to the Q&A.
Looks like you've answered everything. People want this presentation, but that will be included in tomorrow's follow-up email. I think we got it all.
Well, perfect. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And then Casey, I'm honored. Thanks for reaching back out and not disowning me after I left RP, to be able to be part of the CRM hug, the Sales Hub hug, which I don't know how you got that, but that's really cool that HubSpot gave you the sales hug.
No, we're excited to be back in action. Thank you, Matt, for being our first guest in round 2. And like I said, we have a lot of exciting speakers coming up. You will be getting emails about these events. Make sure you're following us on LinkedIn as well to keep up with everything. And I'm excited about what's to come.
Roger that. Well, thank you, Casey. For me, I'll say stay awesome. Keep doing it big.
And then
And stay
salute.
super. Oh, and stay super. So adios, everybody.
Stay super. Thank you, guys.